Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. I've made it over to Nashville, Tennessee, and super excited to be at the Cheekwood Estate and Gardens with Peter Grimaldi, and excited to show off some of this beautiful, beautiful estate. Can you tell me something about yourself? Tell the audience something about yourself and maybe your history here at the garden?
Sure.
Okay.
Again, I'm Peter. I'm the Vice President of Gardens and Facilities. Been here for about 5 years. Started in the green industry like many of us,
Right.
pushing my dad's lawnmower down the block, right?
Right.
Went to school, got a degree in plant science. I graduated from Cornell. Lost in commercial landscape construction for about 5 or 6 years.
Right, I did that as well.
And then I found public horticulture, which was a unique opportunity to apply my combination of knowledge and skills.
Nice. So this garden is really divided up into many individual gardens, separate garden spaces. And so behind us is the color garden.
Color garden.
Okay, and and this is flipped out every year, new.
It goes through, the color garden rotates through spring, summer, and fall. And what you see now is the summer expression.
Okay, got you.
Which is in place through Mother's Day, between Mother's Day and Halloween, right? And in mid-September it gets a pumpkin and mum overlay,
Gotcha.
When both of those elements are kind of stitched into the prevailing backbone of the summer display.
In the winter, is it pansies and those kinds of things? Or
in the winter, in October and November, we go into flowering bulbs. We're planting tulips and hyacinths, some of which are overplanted with violas.
Violas, okay, yeah, probably a little more, touch more cold hardy.
Touch more cold hardy than just straight pansy.
Yeah, gotcha. How many? So this is a big bulb display.
This is a big bulb display. So including the hyacinths, we install over 150,000 spring flowering bulbs.
Wow! Reinstall
every year.
Right. Reinstall. Don't count on it. Yeah. Don't count on any of them coming. You're redoing it.
It's an annual. It's an annual installation.
Right.
We do select pre-chilled. Everything we plant is pre-chilled, so it comes up more reliably.
Right.
But nothing is expected to perennialize. And no components of the display are expected to perennialize. So it makes for a very colorful compost pile in late spring.
Yeah. So I called this monotone, and then I had seen the flags because I had been here a little while before we started talking, and I had seen this garden, and I had not made the connection between the two. Can you explain this?
Well, we're there now.
Okay, yes.
So Cheekwood, Historic Estate, Botanical Garden, Museum of Art. I like to draw an analogy between the museum and the garden, as both of us have a combination of permanent collections and temporary exhibitions. The color garden is our temporary exhibition space. And every year, every season, when the challenge could otherwise be just make it pretty and make it different than last year, we like to link the horticultural displays to what's happening concurrently in the museum or in the expression of art on the grounds, right? And we use that as our creative jumping off point, if you will. And so this year, the flags are an art installation presented by our Museum of Art, which is an interesting study in color theory. The artist collective is Luftwerk, and the flags, as they sweep through the Arboretum lawn, present the visible spectrum of light and color, right? And so the color garden is the same, a similar study, and presenting the spectrum through a progression. It's organized in the same sequence as the artists have, and as you can see, here when we land on white in flowers, the flags originate in the same color and kind of take off. So it's a level of sophistication in planning that keeps my team interested and engaged, and just adds another dimension to kind of what we're doing here. This is our Japanese garden, Shomuen, which translates loosely to pine mist forest. And whether it's merely an institutional rumor or not, we like to say that this is a Japanese abstraction of the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee, which is a beautiful rumor at the least. Originally designed by David Harris Engel in the late 1970s. And so historic in its own right, Engel being one of the more prominent Western Japanese garden designers. And we consider this a masterpiece within a masterpiece, if you will. And Shomuen is at least several things, has some conventional tea garden expressions. We have a bamboo grove, but it is, as enjoyed from this perspective, a dry garden and a viewing garden. So presented across a truncated and forced perspective, we're looking out across first the ocean and then over the hills and into the mountains. And so building on that viewing garden concept, Engel kind of keeps this view very much hidden from the visitors, and originally hid the inside of the garden, encircled the interior of the garden with a comprehensive hedge expression, and only revealed this to the visitors once they came down the hill. And so what makes this garden brilliant, the dry lake being the original site of the Cheek family tennis courts, site selection was the first stroke of brilliance, is if again we're looking out across a mountainscape, your traditional association with mountains and the top of the mountain starts at the bottom, and you're looking up and you're wondering what the view might look like from the top, or what the journey might be like to get there. And the Japanese garden at Cheekwood, Engel is choreographing just the opposite. It's an inverse experience, and the journey it starts at the top, and the journey is about coming down to the bottom and then kind of revealing that for the first time. And so it's dramatic in that way. But getting back to the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee, obviously classically styled as a Japanese garden, but featuring some native plants in combination with what you would expect to see in the Japanese black pines. But we also have some white pines, native white pines, styled in the same way. The Catinus and the Muhlenbergia meant to add that smoky element to the hills, if you will. And all of the stone is also native. People talk about native plants all the time. They don't talk about, or they talk less in a garden or in a garden setting about the native stone. And if you're going to, use your plant material and the palette therein to make a connection to the place, native plants adding to that connection and deepening that connection, the stone should also be native. And so throughout the Japanese garden, it's mostly regional limestone and granite. The granite pulled from as far away as Georgia, and so we consider that to be regional. So abstracted and absolutely stylized as a Japanese garden expression, but grounded in Middle Tennessee in both the plants and the stone.
So we come to the sculpture garden area. You want to talk us through this all native plants in this area?
All native plants, and set in a naturalized setting. Cheekwood, originally 100 acres, now 55, was cleared when the family bought the property and began developing the property. So no old growth to speak of. So I like to describe it as a naturalized woodland. And the sculpture trail, which we just renovated in the past 3 years, presented an opportunity to collect into our Southeastern Natives plant collection. Right. And so the collected material on the trail is exclusively native, and as much as possible, and with only few exceptions, excludes even cultivars. So exclusively,
so straight species,
exclusively native and straight species.
Gotcha.
One of the best examples, delightful examples of that is the Rus aromatica, which has become popular in the trade, by grow low, and we all know it as grow low.
Right.
The straight species of fragrant sumac is fantastic.
Nice.
In size, stature, texture, fruiting body, and so that's been an interesting exploration.
What other collections are here at the garden?
So including the natives, the nationally accredited Cornus collection, dogwoods,
right. Gotcha.
and the historic plant collection are our big three.
Okay. Native dogwoods, or just that would include Asian
We focus on, it does include, we've got a lot of Kusa,
Gotcha.
but our collecting plan in the dogwood space is to focus on Cornus florida and Cornus forta hybrids, especially those that have been developed in Tennessee.
Right. Okay.
To establish the connection to the area. Dogwoods being an historically important economic crop to the nursery industry in Tennessee.
Right, and more breeding disease resistance.
Right.
And looking at disease resistance.
So here in the trail, that represented a risk, right? The landscape architect thought I was crazy. All of the plantsmen thought I was crazy. Like, are you sure you want straight species? And it's like, well, yeah. Let's explore.
There's nothing wrong with it.
Let's explore the diversity within the genome, right? And let's get the oldest, wildest, hairiest Cornus flora that you've got in the back, in some back row of your property that I can get out here.
Nice.
And then, in addition to the big three, we have a series of display collections, which are managed less intensively with respect to intent and kind of the energy and the resources we allocate to collecting. And then we also, trees obviously fit into all three of those primary plant collections, native, dogwood, and historic. And so we manage the Arboretum as a display collection.
Right.
And Cheekwood is a level 2 Arboretum. It's on the Morton Register, listed on the Morton Register, and accredited as a level 2 Arboretum in the ArbNet registry. So we're proud of the trees, the native trees, and especially the dogwoods and the big old historic ones.
Right. Perfect. So I came to shoot a garden, and there happens to be this house here in the middle of it. The house is pretty spectacular.
It is,
yeah.
And the house is meant to be in the middle of it.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And both the house and the surrounding landscape were designed by Bryant Fleming, who's notable for his early contributions to landscape architecture as a professional discipline, but also his various works and masterpieces, including Cheekwood.
Right.
And so, to borrow words from Frank Lloyd Wright, the house is of the hill and not on the hill.
Right.
And the way that Fleming articulated the building at the top of a ridge, and kind of built the surrounding hardscapes, walls, stairs, garden areas. It was really meant to, and it continues to look and feel like the house is growing out of the ground.
It does.
There's this intimate connection between the house and the surrounding gardens and landscape beyond. Yeah,
it's incredible, and I love it. Everything does tie back together and ties you back to the house. Everything's going to lead you back here. The stone work is amazing. Talk about these boxwoods, because they're an important part of this.
So most of the boxwoods on the property are original to the property, and the cheeks themselves. Particularly Mabel Cheek, the matriarch. The original matriarch had a passion for boxwoods and collected boxwoods. They called it boxing. Jumped in the family station wagon, or let's be honest, had someone else probably driving the family station wagon to collect boxwoods throughout the region, which gives us an incredible diversity of boxwoods, and represents one of our most extensive plant collections, exact provenance, species and provenance a little bit harder to discern. Certainly harder to discern than the modern plant collections, where there was a professional staff kind of keeping track of what everything was and where everything came from.
Right. How do you make the kind of money that can build something like this, or where'd their wealth originate?
Sure. So Leslie Cheek marries Mabel Wood.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I always thought Cheekwood was kind of a silly name until I figured out that it was really a completely endearing conjunction of their two names, right?
Yep.
It's very sweet in that way. Cheekwood. So Leslie and Mabel both came from well-established families, and Leslie was successful in his own right as a wholesale grocer. His cousin owned and operated the Cheekneal Coffee Company, which developed and presented the Maxwell House blend here in Nashville.
Yes.
And Leslie invested well in his cousin's business, and in 1929 sold his shares in that business for a significant fortune, which he invested in developing Cheekwood.
Wow.
And so it's considered as an American country place era estate. And sort of the American expression of what new American wealth modeled after the inspiration they found in Europe.
Right.
Bought land, hired famous architects, and did something like this.
It's beautiful.
Which, you could consider that as something that they did for themselves, but ultimately a tremendous service to the people of Nashville and the people across the country. Ultimately, kind of continued by their daughter, Huldah, who gifted the property to the people of Nashville in 1959. And so Cheekwood opened in 1960 as the Tennessee Botanical Garden and Fine Arts Center.
Okay.
And so just 2 years ago in 2020, we celebrate our 60th anniversary as a public institution.
Nice.
Always meant to be, and I've seen the deed, the single dollar changed hand. Here it is, Cheekwood. This is my family home. It should be a botanical garden, an arboretum, and a museum of art. And that's the mission that we're carrying out to this day. At the time that Fleming advised the Cheeks in purchasing this property and developing this property, he was also working with what was then the public park system in the development of Percy Warner Park. And so Fleming knew, again, when he was articulating the house and arranging the property, that this view would be protected in perpetuity, which is, as you can see, a very different experience from looking out over modern suburbia. And so Cheekwood is very lucky, and always has been, to be embraced by the Warner Park system, the Nashville Public Parks, which is one of the larger public park systems in the country, and really kind of reinforces this bucolic setting that Fleming was going for originally, that we're still celebrating today. And the water features, along with this, some of the masonry expressions and the boxwoods, are one thing that Fleming does to kind of weave together different parts of the property and create connectivity through different parts of the property. And so he places the house on top of the hill, and then kind of brings the water past the house and through a series of non-connected but kind of definitely conceptually linked water features all the way through the landscape and down the hill. Again, just reinforcing this concept that the house is kind of grown out of the earth and is embraced and supported and buttressed by all of these formal gardens. Kind of looking out from this position on top of the hill, it's about the radial geometry and symmetry, kind of in all directions, and following some primary view sheds and sight lines, both from the house out into the park and to the house, as we've enjoyed from different places on the property.
So another one of the mini gardens here is a children's garden. Yeah.
And the children's garden finds itself at the end of our eastern garden progression. We've talked a lot about the historic nature of the property, And you can generally organize the property as historic on the left, botanical gardens on the right. And so we've got a series of gardens developed between 1969 and 2019, right? So over 50 years that kind of celebrate different themes or different groups of plants here on the grounds of Cheekwood. So children's garden, obviously aimed at our youngest visiting demographic, children and their families, but was not passed up as the horticultural opportunity that it really was. And so our newest garden is right next to and embraced by our oldest garden, the Howe Garden, which is the closest thing we have to a pure native plant organization or native plant garden at Cheekwood. And so the native plants come out of the Howe and kind of sweep around the perimeter of the children's garden, and then we start to get a little bit more exuberant and introduce some exotics into some of the core areas, just to add a little bit more color and energy, and capitalize on some of the display opportunity.
All right, so this place is absolutely amazing. Every corner you turn, every vista is something new. The topography of this place, you know, hides the next treasure, you know, one after another. We haven't talked about plants all that much in this video, and normally, you know, it's all about horticulture on this channel. This is one of your favorite trees back here behind me.
It is Tilia americana, or basswood. It's on the Arboretum list, and so we do share it with our guests, direct people to it, but it's otherwise kind of hiding in all of the gardens, as they've just described. But I remember when I was a bit younger and earlier in my career, I did some work at President Lincoln's summer cottage in Washington, D.C., and there was a giant Tilia americana just kind of presiding over this historic estate. And here, you know, obviously planted in more modern times, just kind of got this relatively unassuming native tree. Speaks to me a little bit. You know, a lot of the breeding in Tilia over the past several decades has been focused on some of the smaller varieties, street trees, silver foliage. But just basswood is just kind of a big, gnarly native tree, and I like it. Right, super underused. Yeah, oh, super underused. Super underused. Thank you very much for being so welcoming here today. How do they find out more about Cheekwood and open hours, those kinds of things? On the website, on social media. Yeah. Okay. I'll link all those things down below. And thank you for that. And we're open year round, 6 days a week, Tuesday through Sunday, year round, and try and create interest, present interest horticulturally, and otherwise in all 4 seasons. Right, and that's, you know, something I talk about on the channel a lot, guys. This is a garden. If you visited it multiple times a year, it would be different each time you visit it. And you can see, if you're in this central Tennessee area, you could see things that you could have color on kind of year round. You know, you could take things from this and put them in your home garden and be able to, That's the whole idea. So spring with blooms, summer in the color garden, fall harvest, mums, pumpkins, holiday lights is a big deal at Cheekwood. And then next year we'll be presenting our orchid display in the mansion, Orchids in the Mansion's 5th year, which is kind of fun. Nice. Thank you, Peter.